My name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the chairperson for the Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. And today is April 23rd, 2023. And we're producing this interview for the Library of Congress for the Veterans History Project through Zoom. And sir, what is your name?
My name is Alan Wayne Kochenderfer.
Okay. Kochenderfer, how do you pronounce it? Kochenderfer?
Yes, that's good, yeah.
Okay, did I do okay? Thank you. Sir, when is your birthday?
September 17th, 1945.
Okay. And where were you born?
Believe it or not, I was born in rural Cochrane, Wisconsin, a little town along the Mississippi River, south of Minneapolis, about 100 miles. And I'm sitting in our sunroom at our fairly new home here. I'm sitting 1 mile away from where I was born in 1945.
Wow. And what city do you live in? What city and state are you in?
Well, I'll tell you, we're rural people. We have a little 20-acre hobby farm outside the little village of Cochrane, Wisconsin.
Nice, very nice. Okay, let's see. What branch of the service were you in?
I spent my time in the U.S. Army and the Wisconsin National Guard, part of the Army.
And what years did you serve? From what year to what year?
Well, I started out enlisting as a junior in college. In 1966, I entered active duty on the 23rd of May in 1966. I served active duty until April 75. Then I joined the Wisconsin Army National Guard and served there until 1990, and then in the inactive reserve probably for another 5 years.
Okay, and why did you choose that branch of service?
Well, I chose the service to begin the period and the Army in particular. I graduated from high school a little before that, obviously in 1963, and I left there with a couple of ambitions that I wanted to be an engineer, first of all. And secondly, my high school history teacher, a man by the name of Mr. Arlie Everson, required us each day to go, part of the class assignment was to listen to the world and national news the night before, and we discuss it in class. Well, I got interested in what was going on then, what was referred to as Indochina. We're back in 1962. In Indochina, specific, they weren't even hardly using the word Vietnam. Yeah, I got interested in that and went on to college, and I just kept watching the news and got more and more interested. I guess mainly as a young man looking as a source of adventure, kind of an adventuresome young chap. And my family I come from a non-military family. The Army just seemed like the normal thing to do. You go join the Army and looking for adventure. So that's why I guess I selected the Army.
How old were you, and what were you doing before you went in the service? Where were you?
I was 20 years old when I enlisted, and I was in college. I was a junior in college in a civil engineering program at Platteville, Wisconsin. I wanted to be an engineer, but the Vietnam thing on TV just kept something tweaking my brain. I said, I've got to go get some of that adventure.
Okay. So where was basic training?
Went down to Land of Misery, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
What rank were you when you separated from the service, by the way?
A colonel.
You were colonel. Yes, sir. Okay. So were you drafted or enlisted? You joined, didn't you?
I was looking for,
What, were you an officer when you went in?
No, I was a private and took my basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, went over to Fort Knox, Kentucky, took my advanced individual training as a tank crewman and spent a few months thereafter waiting for a slot in OCS, Officer Candidate School. And I was up for E5 sergeant. I had my promotion orders to E5 rank was very fast as we were building the Army for Vietnam. Then we're 1966. And I had orders for a Sergeant E5, so I can always say I was a private, I was a sergeant, I was a lieutenant, I was a colonel.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what was basic training and tech school like?
Basic training was, I understand the sensitivity of certain subjects. I fully understand that, Mr. Cartwright. But we had like a 3-week wait in the reception center waiting for our new barracks and to occupy our new barracks. And we really got harassed in that by acting sergeants in that. And once I got through the reception station, basic training was no problem. I'd been an athlete in college and high school and that, and the hard physical training was nothing. I considered it no problem. It was kind of routine.
How long was basic training and how long was AIT?
Well, okay, basic training was 8 weeks after we got through the 3 weeks in the reception center. And then AIT was another, I think, 8 or 10 weeks becoming a tank crewman.
Okay. All right. Where was your first duty station?
My duty station, I was in the school cycle. I never really got into any other duty than the school cycle. Went to my AIT, Advanced Individual Training at Fort Knox. And after that, well, I was at the Armor School for about a month or two there.
Okay.
Just serving detail work there, waiting for a place in OCS. I started OCS maybe, I don't know, August or something like that, from 1966, 23-week program. Graduated from that on the 5th of May, 1967.
Where was that 23-week program? What state?
I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Oh, that was still okay. Gotcha. All right. So when you were done with all of that, where did you get orders to go?
Well, about halfway through OCS, the people who came out, young people, the first lieutenants, had just graduated from flight school with their bright, shiny silver wings on and said, hey, we got a deal for you. You go to flight school here, you can tear up all your other contractual enlistment obligations. I think I was up to, I enlisted for 4 years, 2 years additional for OCS and so forth. You can tear all that up and come to the flight school. It'll pay you $35 a day tax-free TDY, temporary duty pay, temporary duty to flight school en route to Vietnam. It'll pay you $245 a month flight pay from day one instead of when you actually earn your wings a year later. And they did mention that your enlistment period then, the Army wouldn't give you all that for free, you know. They did say, well, you'll just be voluntary indefinite. You belong to the Army. You have no release date, no scheduled release date. But the war will be over soon, so it's a good deal for you. So I was at Fort Knox when I signed that deal and went down to West Texas, to Fort Walters, Texas. Started flight school down there right after OCS. I suppose it was.
Was that in
July
Texas? You said Texas?
Yeah, Texas. Fort Walters, Texas. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it was hot.
It was hot.
It was about August when I got down there, and it was hot.
Okay. And by the way, in basic training and tech school, were there any casualties?
No,
Anybody get
not
hurt?
really.
Okay.
Oh, there's people got hurt in that normal training injuries, pull muscles and all that, but nothing out of the ordinary, no.
Okay, good.
In OCS and that, interesting to note, the dropout rate was about 50%. The Army made the best effort they could to recruit good people to send to officer candidate school. It was a demanding course, really demanding. And they always, the theme of every day was what the attack officers could do to you to make you quit. They were looking for somebody with unbreakable spirit, extreme perseverance under difficult conditions, because your next stop normally after OCS would be a platoon leader, platoon commander in Vietnam in charge of 40 young soldiers. So they wanted people trained the best possible of the right mentality to do the job. So 50% dropout rate in OCS we had.
Wow. Okay. Well, I understand that. Okay. Okay. So again, I think you answered me already, but just again, please tell me, where was your first duty station after school?
Well, I was in the school cycle for 2.5 years.
Wow.
I
Okay.
went to flight school for 6 months at Fort Walters for primary training, and then over to Fort Rucker, Alabama for the second half. It's a years-long program.
Okay.
And I went to Fort Rucker for I got graduated from flight school. It must have been in April. Got married in between there too. And of course, we were on orders to Vietnam temporary duty to the flight school. Got out of flight school, went up to Fort Knox, Kentucky for 1 month to a air cavalry unit that was forming up to go to Vietnam. They never did. I spent a year up there flying, a month up there flying the light observation helicopters. That's important later. But anyhow, that was a regular duty station. It took me a month to get out of there and get my butt to Vietnam is what I wanted to do. It took me a month to get that paperwork done. And my first duty station was really 1 month, 1 month at a unit at Fort Knox en route to Vietnam.
Got
I
it.
got to Vietnam then in June 1968.
How long were you stationed in Vietnam?
Well, I was ordered there for a year like everybody did. And after a year, I extended for another 6 months. And then after 6 months there, I did another 6 months extension. I didn't quite complete that one. I guess I spent about 22 months there.
Okay. So tell me about your experiences in Vietnam.
Well, I tell you, you could write a book or three about that. And anyhow, I got to Vietnam and en route to Vietnam was probably one of the most important events of my life. Some reason I was an armor officer, likely to be assigned to an air cavalry outfit. Anyhow, I got orders, unrequested orders, which you get sometimes, to go to the U.S. Air Force Jungle Survival School at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. An absolute miserable 2 weeks training how to escape, survive, and so forth. Escape, capture, but not become a POW. Did that for 2 weeks, got to Vietnam and got assigned to an air cavalry squadron down in 4th Corps. Vietnam, as you probably know, was divided into 4 sections up to the north at the 17th parallel down to the Kamal Peninsula. 4 lines drawn across the country at various parallels of latitude. I was in 4th Corps, the Delta, the southern area, about the size of the state of Wisconsin. Quite a lot of population, the rice growing area, the breadbasket of Vietnam, the breadbasket of Southeast Asia, really. And started out there, and this is an important little detail here. The first day I got out to my unit, a couple of days in the country, getting processed and that, I got out to my unit, and of course, everybody had to fly with the troop commander, a major commander of the air cavalry troop. And I was assigned to fly with him just for general checkout. And I went to Vietnam seeking adventure, as most young men did that volunteered. And I got shake out of bed. I was at base camp about an hour earlier than scheduled. And we had the urgent mission to go out and fly out. Fuel was at a premium. There was no U.S. ground combat troops or in the Delta, in 4th Corps. There were none. There were Army advisors and special forces, but not regular infantry battalions or anything like that. We dealt with the local people. The South Vietnamese Army was mainly a source of infantry troops. And a province in Vietnam is like a state government in the United States, and a district government is like a county government. And each one had their chiefs and administration and so forth. Okay. Anyhow, we had on out a certain heading of that for an hour. We had 2 hours and 15 minutes of fuel on a Huey. And so when you're flying out away from your fuel source for anything over an hour, You have to plan very carefully because you get to the point of no return. And we went out a report of Viet Cong and that attacking a district village, the district headquarters. Got out there, and my troop commander, the major, he knew these people. We got to know most of these people in local government, working with them. And his wife was laying on the floor in a straw mat, a rice straw mat there, blood soaked and that. The Viet Cong, seeking additional support from the village and that, had recruited a bunch of young men in the village, probably 400 or 500 people lived in the village, and they had systematically raped her all night and caused great physical injury. And she was laying there bleeding out, dying. First person I ever saw die right in front of me. And that was the system. That was the communist system. I had been told about it, educated about it. You serve the government. The government doesn't do anything for you. You serve the government. You will serve the government one way or the other, with enough brutality and force and that most people come around. Anyhow, that was my indoctrination to Vietnam. I forgot all about the idea, the quest for adventure and that, but this became something very, very personal to me. This kind of, I grew up in a loving family at home. This kind of treatment that simply was unacceptable. That guided me and drove me and caused me to re-up in Vietnam. I was there on a mission, and something had to be done with the communist system that was taking over that part of the world. It still is alive and well today, of course, in China and Russia. I was dealing with it firsthand every day. That's what got me started going in Vietnam. And I flew the Loaches, the light observation helicopters, for about a week. Extremely hazardous duty, generally left to the, I always told the teenagers, the really young people that hadn't learned enough about fear yet. I flew them for a week and got shot down my first time, had my observer killed, Sergeant Bergstrom. He had about a week left to go in country, and I was just getting into the country, and he, he got shot and killed in an engagement. And that kind of bothered me. That was the first time I saw the death of a fellow American. I decided not to fly the Loaches anymore. I was also Cobra qualified, the Cobra gunship qualified. The air cav troop had the light observation helicopters, the LOH-6s, the Loaches they were called, had the Cobra gunships, and of course the Hueys. I was qualified in all three of them, which was a valuable asset. I went over and flew the Cobras for a couple of weeks, and a captain came in from Germany, and command positions were all allocated by date of rank, and he outranked me by a few weeks. So he got command of the Cobra platoon. I went over to the excuse me, the Hueys, and flew them then for about 6 months. We flew every day, of course. We had a 10-day cycle. We flew out a base field called Vinh Long, and out to the border areas at the Cambodia border where we usually operated across the border. We can say that now. It was about 125 miles, a good hour's flight, and we had fuel out there. And cross-border operations, we'd be on a 10-day cycle. We'd be 9 days out there, parked aircraft and revetments, and special forces for about a 200-mile stretch of the border. There was 5 A teams, 5 10-man U.S. Special Forces teams utilizing Vietnamese troops. And they had parking spaces there for the aircraft or helicopters. 13 helicopters in an air cav troop, 4 the observation, Loach aircraft, 4 Cobras gunships, and 4 Hueys, and another Huey for command and control. We operated out of there for 9 days. and one day back at the base field for aircraft maintenance and R&R and so forth. And daily missions were simply, we were organized in 100 killer teams. And that's what we did. The Loaches would hunt people, and we were down at the end of the Ho Chi Minh Trail coming out of Cambodia. Hunting was good. The Loaches would find people, engage them to the best of their ability, go over to take over from there. And if it was a populated area, you have to have infantry to go through the village and not indiscriminately, inappropriately kill people. You need to have infantrymen that can talk to these people and sort out the good ones from the bad ones. And an insurgency like that, in other words, a civil war, the good and the bad guys are mixed together. They do live together, and you have to sort them out.
Okay. You were never a prisoner of war, were you?
No,
Good.
prisons of war down in the Delta, which was probably about 400 or 500 miles from Hanoi, where the prison camp was, the Hanoi Hilton, where the North Vietnamese main prison camp was. There were no people that were captured in the Delta that made it that far north. Survival, it was not survivable. The harsh, inhumane conditions were simply not survivable. The other thing, the aviators, the air cav people down there, the pilots, the air crews, there was a $10,000 gold bullion price on our heads. Our aircrafts were clearly marked with the cross sabers and that. And we did run across North Vietnamese paymasters with their pay chest and that had money allocated, gold bullion and little medals and a narrative. And that it's a whole lot easier if you're a North Vietnamese soldier and you shoot down and capture an American pilot. It's a whole lot easier to handle that person dead while you're turning him in to get your $10,000 gold bullion. It's a lot easier dead than alive. Survival was not possible. There simply wasn't anything as a POW. No, I never was captured. No, here I am.
Great. Okay. Were there many casualties in your unit? Were there any casualties in your unit?
Yes. You get awful thick skin awful fast. Casualties, we had 2.7 million soldiers passed through Vietnam over the 15 years that we were there. We suffered 58,470 some casualties. Casualties, I mean fatalities. About 3% of the people that went through there were air crews. Anyhow, shorten that all up. Yes, our air cav unit in 1 year, we had 50% casualties as fatalities. If you stay another year, you got to say you start out with 100 people. After 1 year, you're down to 50. After next year, you're down to 25. Look over your shoulder, you look around, it gets pretty lonesome. Yes, casualties were extremely high. It's the nature of our business.
Did you receive any, after your tour, medals and commendations, citations?
They were very common in that I have the normal Silver Star, Bronze Stars with Valor, and on, all that sort of stuff. No Purple Hearts. I never got directly shot in that. I flew 2,111 combat hours, giving me 84 air medals. I received all the normal decorations, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, after Vietnam, what was your next duty station?
After Vietnam, the demand for training pilots was extremely high. Went back to Fort Rucker, Alabama, the Army Aviation Training Center. I was instructor pilot. I was there for 5 years. I was instructor pilot for 3 years, teaching, transitioning the initial entry students into flying the Hueys, their operational aircraft. I spent 3 years doing that, and then a year on a program adapting Army aviation to use the night vision goggles, the very early night vision goggles to fly at night. And then another year, last year there, spent a year developing and training Army aviation pilots to fly nap of the earth, getting ready to fly in Europe in the NATO against the Warsaw Pact, against the Soviet forces, that is fly between the trees and not above them to avoid the radar. So I had 3 years of flight instructing, 1 year with the night vision goggles, and 1 year with nap of the earth training.
Okay.
And I got out of the Army. Peacetime Army is, let's just say, not a good place to be at that time. I got out of the Army in April 1975.
Okay. You got out.
Yep,
Okay.
got
For
off
how?
of active duty.
I'm sorry.
I got off of active duty, to put it like that.
Okay. Okay. And what did you do when you got out?
Well, I had completed my master's degree in airport management by that time. I had changed my mentality from being a civil engineer that I had done 3 years of college in before the Army. I was going to stay in aviation, airport management. Well, I looked around the country looking for airport manager jobs, and they were pretty scarce just then. It was something new. And I had a wife and two small children. So I came back to Wisconsin and bought a automotive service center. I started operating that. After about a couple of months there, man, I missed flying. So I got back with the Wisconsin Army National Guard and got me a flight job position at the aviation company at Madison in the Wisconsin Army National Guard. So I flew with them a couple of years. And then I realized that there was no great rank there. The commander there was a major. I was a major, and I needed something more than that. So I converted, of all things, to a mechanized infantry person. My feeling always was if I couldn't fly my helicopter someplace, I didn't need to go there. As a mechanized infantry person, I had to go back to school a while for that. And I cast my lot with the mechanized infantry unit in Wisconsin, the 32nd Separate Mechanized Infantry Brigade, a large unit, about a 6,000 man unit. I was with them then from till 76 to 88, I was with them.
What was that?
I served with the Wisconsin National Guard and from 1976 through 1988.
Gotcha. Okay. And while you were in the National Guard, where did you deploy to? Where did you do your weekends anyway? Where was the?
I was kind of a fast burner. I did 3 weekend drills a month instead of one. I was ambitious and I wanted to get someplace. Our Fort McCoy is a fully fledged Army base in central Wisconsin. We had units training there every weekend, year round, at a high state of readiness. And so I spent 2 or 3 weekends in the field at Fort McCoy. We were headquartered out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and had the opportunity for several years, each winter, return of forces to Germany, a program where we send units to Germany to train with our NATO allies. I did that a couple of years. I became the operations officer for the brigade. First, I had a battalion command of a 760 man mechanized infantry battalion. I did that for a couple of years, and then I went to the brigade headquarters, became the operations officer there, the person for operations under the direction of the commander, operations of the 6,000 man unit. Went to Germany, 6 week stints in Germany, a couple of years with that.
Okay. Okay. Were there any casualties during your National Guard service?
No, nothing serious, no fatalities, I'll put it like that.
Great.
Just a normal casualty, somebody falls off of a tank or, breaks a leg or something minor like that.
Right. What year did you get married, by the way?
I got married the 23rd of December, 1967.
Okay. And I think I just saw your wife's name.
Okay, we have to be a little careful there, our names. That
Kathy?
marriage lasted for
Oh,
41 years until 2008. Unfortunately, we got divorced after 41 years.
wow.
Severe alcoholism involved in the marriage. And I remarried my present wife, Kathy, in 2012.
Well, congratulations. Okay.
Yeah, it was a good deal for both of us. We found love late in life.
Right.
And in the past 2 years, I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's. Part of the mission in Vietnam was spraying Agent Orange in support of the Vietnamese forces. The Vietnamese villages out in the countryside would be built in the middle of the jungle along the canals and so forth. And if they were going to defend themselves, as we went to the Vietnamization program starting in 1969, they'd have to pick up more of the fighting themselves, which is appropriate, of course. We had to clear the foliage, the jungle foliage out, so they had fields of fire and that to defend themselves at night. So we sprayed the Agent Orange for them. I've been soaked with spraying Agent Orange out of the Hueys 50, maybe 75 times. Agent Orange had some negative health impacts early on after exposure, but it seems like the real epidemic of serious fatal illnesses caused by it are happening at about the 50-year point. I think I contracted mine at about the 52 years later. At Mayo Clinic in Rochester, diagnosed as a specific type of aggressive Parkinson's caused directly by Agent Orange.
Wow.
So that was kind of the last. That was kind of a combat-related injury, long delayed.
Right. While you were in the service, how did you have any problems staying in touch with your family? While you on any time that you were on active duty or deployed?
No, not really. Family back home and that. At Fort Rucker, most of my assignments of that were company tours. That is, your wife and family were assigned with you there and had housing available. And back home, we didn't have cell phones or computers back then.
Right.
But telephone's been around a long time, and no, never had. I always had close family back home. Here and there, never had any problem communicating.
Okay. While you were in this, okay, so, by the way, on active duty, how was the food, and did you have all the supplies that you needed throughout the active duty time?
I would say yes. Of course, Vietnam, there was no problem on supplies there. That was combat units were priority one. Fort Rucker was training, Army aviation training. There was no problem on supplies there. And then Ronald Reagan became president along about 1980 and increased funding, congressional funding for the military greatly increased in 1980 as we began the process of, let's say, shutting down the former Soviet Union, financially and technically causing their collapse. By 1990, they did collapse upon themselves. So in the military, there was good funding during, let's say, the Reagan years and up to the collapse of the Soviet Union. There was good funding there. I never had a problem with funding, and food was good. Yeah, I got to learn as a young soldier, as a young lieutenant, as a young captain in Vietnam. I never met a sea ration I didn't like. In the air cavalry, we spent those 9 out every 10 days in the field, and we ate sea rations all the time for those 9 days. And I found them to be completely satisfactory. and the MREs that replaced the C rations were even better. I like good food. I like a good 4 or 5 star restaurant, but I'm happy with C rations.
Okay. That's good news. Um, and from what you've already shared, so how have you handled this pressure, stress, and trauma that you have experienced in your military career?
I think real good through the selection process to go to and make it through officer candidate school. You had to have be a good, stable, sound, tough mind. That served me well. We engaged in combat for 22 months every day. I lost my crew. I was shot down 7 times.
Geez.
I was the only survivor and left for dead 4 of those times. I escaped and evaded, and here I are with a lot of wear and tear. Yes, you call it PTSD. I have never sought treatment for PTSD. I have a lot of bad dreams and that. But I tell you what, all the treatment in the world is not going to take out of your brain what's there. You're still going to have those recollections, call them bad dreams, call them whatever you want. They're not going to go away. They can teach you maybe how to deal with them. But yes, I have had a life of, let's say, my previous wife and Kathy now, they've gotten used to the loud shouting and yelling at night, very disruptive sleeping habits and that. Yes, I have a lot of dreams in that, but they're just simply recollections. That's not all bad. I don't consider that all that bad. It's my job as a commander of small or large units to have my head screwed on straight. My men deserve a commander with their head on straight. I couldn't be otherwise. I've dealt with it okay. It's there, it's present. It has had an effect on my brain. I'll go to my grave with that. But it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Okay. In general, how did you get along with your fellow enlisted and officers since you've been on both sides of the fence?
I tell you what, as a commander of a 40-man platoon, or the largest unit I commanded was a 760-man battalion. You bet your success as your commander is determined by how good a job your enlisted people do for you. And as an officer, you doggone well better know that and treat those people appropriately. Sure, the missions are hard sometimes. But you need to treat them appropriately, treat them right, because they will determine your success or your failure. So I got along good with them. My fellow officers, it was highly competitive. You know, the officer corps promotions are up or out. You have like 5 years, 3 years, or whatever to be promoted to the next grade. And if you're not, you're discharged. It's very simple. So it's highly competitive. You have to have some integrity. You have to compete fair and square and not do any backstabbing and that to your fellow officers. But you need to have a high level of respect. The further you go up the chain and rank, your fellow officers at that rank are accomplished. They're more and more accomplished as they advance in rank. They're the ones that were promoted. They're not the ones that got dropped. So you need to have a high level of respect for each other. Respect is key to getting along with fellow men, and that respect takes care of racism, religious bias, or anything like that. And I got along good with my enlisted people. We served each other well, and I had good respect for my fellow officers.
Okay.
It was a good experience.
Good. When you started, when you said you came out in 75, right?
Yes,
So what did you do? What was your civilian job?
like I said, I bought an automotive garage and expanded it, got a lot of financing,
Okay.
and turned it into an automotive service center, which was my main livelihood for the family while I served in the National Guard and so forth.
Gotcha. Did you use your GI Bill for anything?
No, I had Officers need to have a college degree as a basic lieutenant or captain. You go to a field grade major or above, you need to have a master's degree. It's just that simple.
Right.
And during the build-up for wartime, such as Vietnam or World War II, whatever, those requirements are largely waived. But as soon as you get back in peacetime, you darn well better take care of those things. So I went to night school and got those requirements out of the way right shortly.
Okay. Did you maintain any close friendships after the military?
Yes, yes, indeed. I have a long, long 100+ Christmas card list.
Okay.
And now in recent years, I'm retired. And for a few years there, since I got married to Kathy, we've done quite a bit of traveling. Military units I used to be with normally have a reunion each year. The Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association, several thousand strong, have a reunion each year. I've been going to those. I have an email list that I periodically touch base with people, from 1966 on. We exchange emails. Yes, I have a lot of good friends. I can't travel anymore. I can't walk and don't talk very well. So I can't travel any longer. But yes, a lot of really, really good friendships and that. The things you did for each other in combat, way above civilians can't understand the things you do for each other. I was left for dead 4 times, and I got picked up, rescued by my fellow pilots and that under extremely hazardous conditions. Best you can understand that those are things you don't forget. Never forget them.
I understand. Just a couple more questions.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Just two more questions. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I learned one. Yeah, I guess I learned one thing. If the U.S. military is given an appropriate mission, they will get it done. We are subservient to the civilian government at all times. And there is a greater and greater divide between the understanding of the world situation by our civilian leaders and probably what is real on the ground, what the military has to deal with. Afghanistan is one of the most recent example of that. We bailed out of Afghanistan, abandoned the people of that country. We bailed out of Vietnam before that and abandoned the people of that country. I hope we hang in there with state of Israel and the Ukraine. Yeah, I learned that the military will get the job done if given a good mission by their civilian commanders.
Got you. How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, a great deal, a great deal. I look at 5 May date, the date I got my commission, 5 May 1967. I look at that date as the most, I'll use the term, I've lost some of my vocabulary, obviously, as the most important day in my life. That being is the date I got that commission opened the doors to endless opportunity. All you had to do was raise your hand and volunteer for this or that. The doors that were open, the opportunity for school, adventure, pilot training, and on, command positions and so forth. Um, it affected my life a great deal. I was a go-getter before I went in the Army, and a much, much more so competitive, driven while I was in the Army, competing to get promoted and doing my job well. I became driven by that, and the Vietnam experience has changed my life a great deal, a great deal. It really has. For the better, I think. It was a positive experience, the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in life. Not fighting so much for the United States over there. The security of the United States was not immediately at risk. It was the well-being of the Vietnamese people that were left to the communist meat grinder when we left. The same as the Afghan people. If we want to talk smart in this country and that about freedom and so forth, we got to reach out and help other people periodically in dire situations, such as Afghanistan or Ukraine. Yes, it's affected my thinking and the actions in life. It's affected me. You know, I spent, I don't know, like 27, 28 years in the military, a good part of my adult life. So that's where I come from. That's who I am.
Okay. Besides the places you've already mentioned, where else have you traveled to over the course of your careers?
Well, I had the opportunity to, in 1990, when the former Soviet Union collapsed, the end of the Cold War, I got out of the reserves and completely retired. And was active, got real active in the VFW and started my travels in the VFW. I started out as a post commander at our little post here, moved on to district commander at 37 posts over probably about 10 counties here in west central Wisconsin. Did that, campaign, became the state commander of the VFW in the state of Wisconsin in 2003 and 2004. Had an extremely successful year there. Traveled 200, I had motel receipts for 287 motel nights. So I traveled Wisconsin. I've been that year as a commander, state commander. I've been in just about every town in the state of Wisconsin. And then I got a little more ambition. After that, I ran and became elected to the National Council Administration or the National Global VFW Organization, the board of directors for the organization that runs the organization day-to-day basis. I did that for 4 years, and I ran the campaign for one of our commanders in chief of the VFW back in 2007, 2008. With him, I traveled to every one of the 50 states at least once campaigning for him. So that's where I've traveled. I've been here and there and darn near everywhere.
Okay. I think there was one more thing I wanted to ask you. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share, by the way, that you already haven't shared? Huh?
No, go ahead. You're good at this. You can direct this
Okay.
interview, and I might chime in, but go ahead and direct it as you see fit.
Well, you did finally, you answered my questions. Yeah, you did. You took care of everything, actually. Well, the last question really is there anything else that you would like to add that you have not stated so far?
Well, I need to mention my wife. Her forefathers came here in 1640 from England, and two of the brothers were, as the relations went on and on, she had two great, some number of great uncles that were sergeants in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, and her family was almost wiped out in the Civil War, and they stood out World War One. Not many left, and her father was a survivor of Pearl Harbor, and her brother was in the U.S. Navy during the Cold War. He was a nuclear power plant engineer on a nuclear submarine, and he spent over 4 years submerged under sea in the nuclear submarine force. And then eventually she got a hold of me here 10 years ago or 12 years ago. And I like to refer to her as an extremely well pedigreed American.
Okay.
She has shared, and her family has shared this American experience. You know, I like to say pretty close equally to me. We're equal partners. And of course, she attended all these activities at the VFW and that with me for the last 10, 12 years.
Right.
One event, the cavalry wears black hats. We're the good guys, but we wear black hats.
Okay.
And I had a cav hat in Vietnam. All the air cavalry people did. I had that cav hat there, and we wore it for ceremonial occasions only, not daily duty. We wore flight helmets during the day flying. I had that cav hat for ceremonial purposes. Well, the only ceremonies we had were memorial services for those that were killed in action. I wore it many times, maybe 50, close to 100 times I wore it for that. I brought it home, put it in a box, in a hat box, and sat there for a better part of 50 years. I simply could not touch it. It just bothered me. Anyhow, back about 3, 4 years ago, there was a Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association went through the tremendous effort of getting a bill passed by Congress to allow us to put a memorial marker stone in Arlington National Cemetery
Nice.
in memory of the 5,000 plus Army helicopter pilots that were killed in Vietnam. It was many, many, many times more hazardous than being an infantryman, obviously. People don't think of that, but that was a fact. Anyhow, I wore that cav hat out there. There was a couple thousand of us old aviators there. I wore that cav hat out there, and it was kind of, what do you call it, coming to terms with things and the closure to things. And now I wear that hat regularly on reunions and so forth. I took it out of its 50-year storage and proudly wear it.
Okay, I'm going to thank you for your service, and I also need to thank you for a wonderful interview. And is Kathy nearby? Is your wife there?
No, she went off to church like we usually do.
Okay.
I'm not going to church this morning because I'm talking to you.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much.